On today's episode of Unsolved Mysteries, what the heck happened to the running back position? We got all that and more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome in to another episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast covering all the biggest stories around the National Football League in right around 30 minutes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, to all the everydayers out there making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, you can subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And it's Tuesday, so you've got Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter, myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson NOLA, Nola on Twitter, your resident NFL experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and of course the big numbers nerds. And we have a lot of big numbers to kind of run through today because one position ain't getting them numbers. The numbers ain't happening. They're getting numbers on the field, but they're not getting the numbers in the bank account anymore. We're going to discuss everything going on around the running back position, and then we'll get to our Yikes, like headlined by the fact that it's finally happening. We'll tell you what as we get there. But Luke, I want to start off here with like the basic question that we're all asking right now across, even the running backs themselves are asking, is running back now all of a sudden a dying position around the NFL with all this devaluation going on?
Right. Yeah. With none of these running backs getting like actual long-term deals, they're all going to either be forced to play on the franchise tag or some kind of holdout or something. Derrick Henry even quote tweeting Matt Miller saying like, well, then if we're going to do all this, just get rid of the position.
Right.
And it's like, are we headed toward that? I think you have to think on a really, really long-term scale. You know, next couple of years, of course not. But by 2038, will there be running backs? I don't know.
Will there be an NFL in 2038?
Right. Will there be a United States? That's a good question. Will there be organized society and currency and all of that? Power, running water. But assuming all of that, I wonder if I'm 14 and I'm a very athletic kid, growing up in Florida, and I'm going to play football. Am I going to put myself, am I going to be like, coach, make me a running back, Yeah. Am I going to ask to try out there, or am I going to try to be a quarterback? Like I'm watching Lamar Jackson. I want to be like him, or like Lamar Jackson watched Michael Vick before him. Like, is that going to be where the most athletic kids go? Because part of the reason that running backs are so devalued is that they are not very scarce. In the high school game, if you're the most athletic kid on the field, you will be running back. Because in the high school game, running backs can be a lot more creative than they can in the pros when everybody's a little bit faster and bigger and better tacklers. In the high school game, running backs can kind of dominate, and you don't even have to have a passing game. You can just be a wing T offense, look like something out of the 1940s and run for a bunch of touchdowns and beat everybody 62-7.
Yes. Or the New Orleans Saints of 2021. Yes.
You're right.
I saw
Go Army. But so when you're the most athletic kid, that might be where you play, and now you're a running back, and then you go to college and you're a running back, and pros you're a running back. So more running backs come out than the league really needs, and so you kind of get this supply and demand thing. There's just so many of them. Why am I going to pay, Josh Jacobs when I can still get a really good running back that was actually like a total superstar in a Power 5 conference, and I can get him in the 7th round?
Yeah.
That might go away as more kids go, I don't know. Running back feels like the one where you get the most concussions and the least money. I'll go try to be Lamar Jackson, and I'll go learn how to throw. I'll play some baseball,
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's the way that things might go. And I know from talking to people at the high school level, like there are a lot of high schools that or high school offenses that do not use like a nominal running back. They'll either have a lot of wide receiver runs,
like?
A lot of stuff out of pistol, a lot of read option stuff where you got, 3 kids who can throw and triple option it, there's stuff like that goes on the high school level. And I'm sure there's plenty of teams lining up like they look like the 1990s New England Patriots lining up in the I formation. But we might go to a league ultimately that doesn't have anyone with the letters RB next to their name. And I'm talking, decades into the future here.
Right.
in ways that we can't really predict. Just like you probably couldn't predict the Lamar Jacksons of the world if you were covering the football in the 80s. Decades into the future, I wonder if things look a little bit different and you just have guys that are ATH, athletes.
That's exactly what I was going to bring to the table. Like, do we
eventually
run a little?
They run some routes. That might be where things shift. And you've got guys like Jonathan Taylor who are at the pinnacle of their position, but they're probably not going to get paid because that's just not what the market dictates.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see a future in the NFL where, 12 personnel, when you've got one running back, two tight ends, two wide receivers on the field, there's a player that's playing out of the backfield, right? That's in that situation. But then when you go to 11 personnel, or you go to, or you go from that to, nothing but receivers, you go to a spread look or something, then all of a sudden that same player that was in the backfield is lining up at the slot, or is lining up in line to block or something like that, depending upon their size. Like, there's a really interesting sort of idea about what this could potentially look like years later. But I think the thing that we're looking at in terms of the most impact right now is the contract numbers, right? You and I looked at it before we started recording, that basically from the franchise tag to the Alexander Madisons of the world, we're looking at an average of around $8 million or so for basically running backs.
Before you get to like the rookie contracts. You get this average of 8 mil and like a median too of 8, like that. There's not like crazy outliers. If anything, there's crazy outliers on the high end.
Yeah, 100%. Alvin Kamara, 15 million, 16 and a half for Christian McCaffrey.
Right. Running backs do not make a lot of money. And it, like at this point, when the first sort of whispers of the do running backs matter kind of conversation happened, we lived in a world where Adrian Peterson was making quarterback money.
Right.
And, Ezekiel Elliott was a top 5 draft pick. And like, that's kind of where the league was valuing running backs in the same way they valued them for decades and decades. Go back to LaDainian Tomlinson, go back to the Walter Paytons of the 80s. And they, like, the league had kind of changed, but the valuation of the position hadn't. And you had this world where we would go, wow, what a great run. And the running back would get all of the credit for it, when really they just kind of ran through an open hole. And you would go, wait a minute, like, did they really earn that? And I think we've sort of over-adjusted at this point where the running back does get a little bit of credit for how open that hole is because of things like pathing, pressing gaps, like other skills, reading it quickly, hitting it quickly. Those holes close up quickly. So the fact that he's in it before it closed, that's on him.
That's a skill. Yeah.
All of that is part of the position that I think we've sort of forgotten about, because it got really, really easy to say, well, running backs don't matter. Play action isn't actually set up by more runs and feel like you're smarter than Pete Carroll. It got a lot easier to say unwise versions of that are, there are smart versions of that argument out there, but it got a little bit too easy to talk about it in a reductive way. And now, like, we've got running backs making wide receiver 3 money.
Yeah.
And still going, this is too much. We need to, these teams are stupid. Why are they still paying running backs? Like, they're not paying running backs anymore.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. We've gone from a day and age, like just here in New Orleans, one of the ones that I can always compare to is that Deuce McAllister, who used to be the Saints, like,
Deuce. Yes.
Incredible. Now he's, he does. Right? He helps out every now and then, but he's the radio voice. He's one of the radio voices.
Oh, that's what it is.
And so Deuce had a season to where he ran for 9 straight games over 100 yards. 9 straight games. It was the 4th longest streak of 100+ yard games in NFL history, or tied for. Now you look at Alvin Kamara, who is like one of the pinnacle examples of a modern day NFL running back, right? What it can look like, has 8 100-yard rushing games in his entire career so far. It's just an entirely different game, but we've overcorrected that, as you mentioned. Devontae Parker just got $5.4 million, and I don't think he's ever done anything in his career. He just got $5.4 million on average to play wide receiver for the New England Patriots, who don't even want to throw the ball if they can help it, with Mac Jones under center. And Austin Eckler is sitting at $6-something million. And that's just,
I think I got $7 million cap hit and 6.1 in cash flow. Like, it's gross. Or
It's
6.1
nuts.
average per year. That's where he's at right now.
Yeah. So those guys are too close in my book, too close. So I think we agree that this is one of those things where maybe the NFL is just like overly adjusted to. We've seen this with the safety position went through this for a little while. Defensive tackle went through this for a little while. Off-ball linebacker went through this for a little while. Maybe this all corrects, but kind of where has this all started and where does it go next? We'll start off by the framework of what happened on Monday, which is none of these running backs getting a second contract or another contract beyond their franchise tag. What does that mean for each of these teams moving forward? And what does it mean for the NFL moving forward? We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You can still bet on running backs though, and you can do that at FanDuel Sportsbook. You can go find over-under totals right now for the 2023 season. You can bet on baseball games and all of that as well. And at FanDuel, they've got a special promo going on. They got a lot of special promos all the time. So go check in at FanDuel.com every once in a while and see if you can get some. But right now, if you sign up with our link, you can get 10 times your first bet amount back in bonus bets up to $200. So if you make a $20 wager on whatever, you will get $200 back in bonus bets, whether or not that bet wins or loses. And to get that, sign up today at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 back in bonus bets by multiplying your first bet tenfold. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And when you win, you get paid out instantly. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Big thank you to all the everydayers out there making this your first listen of the day. So, Luke, one of the reasons why we're having this discourse around this conversation around running backs in the first place is because Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys, we've got Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants, and then, of course, we also have Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders, who all were put on the franchise tag this offseason and did not get a new contract. So they will be playing on the franchise tag in 2023 in a situation in which you're just on that deal. The money's guaranteed, but there's nothing beyond that. You're the position that's taking the most hits, that's touching the ball the second most on offense. And so this is kind of where all this discourse is. So let's start off here. Are you surprised at all with these three running backs not getting an additional contract, or did you kind of expect it to play out this way?
I am certainly not surprised with these guys, Tony Pollard, Jacobs, Barkley. I mean, based on everything we've been talking about, the everything you've ever seen about running backs on TV, unless it's a fantasy football segment, has been about how they probably shouldn't make money. Like that's all we ever talk about with running backs. So of course, that is going to seep into the actions of actual teams. That affects things more than we ever care to admit. But here is what is interesting about this. And I think this is why somebody like Barkley, Jacobs, Pollard, rank Saquon Barkley real quick. Don't have to put a lot into it, but is he top 5, top 3, top 1? Where should he be?
I'd give him top 5 at least.
Top 5
in the NFL. Yep.
So by making just franchise tag money, he is tied for 7th with Pollard and Jacobs.
No.
Below guys like Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry,
Joe Mixon does not deserve to be above Saquon Barkley.
Right. And I don't know if that's still accurate for Mixon. I don't know if these are updated numbers.
It's probably
he just signed.
Yeah,
because I know I'm looking off over the cap, and I know that they always wait for like all the details.
Right.
So I get where they're coming from, where it's like, okay, I am making currently, just because of where I'm at in my contract progression, I'm making less than guys that I think I am better than, and probably have a point, right? If you're like Saquon Barkley being like, why am I making less than Alvin Kamara, who is past this point now, right? I think most Saints fans, if they could trade Kamara for Barkley straight up, would do so. Why is Barkley making less? No?
I don't think that they would. I think that they should, but I don't know if they would. I don't know if they would.
Well, fair enough.
They should.
Fair enough. Plus, you've got Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott out on the market right now, waiting. Now, those two guys were both on kind of fake parts of their contract. I mean, they would sign you sign a 5-year deal and go, are you actually seeing the end of this? Right. The Saints did a bunch of restructures with Kamara, and so he did see a little bit more of that money. Yeah. But Dalvin Cook was it was always a 3-year deal. It just looked like a 5-year deal.
Yep.
So I don't know if that necessarily plays into the positional value thing, but the fact that he's not signed anywhere yet could, right? Although if you listen to Dalvin Cook's camp, it's that he's got the pick of the litter and he's just kind of waiting to make his choice and mulling things over and pitting teams against each other. And I do think that that's true. I think there's a few teams in the AFC East that are looking for his services. But yeah, I think that these guys do have a point in that this market does not reflect merit in the way that it sort of we were told it should.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then you look at like, man, I know we can't bet on contracts being signed over at FanDuel. I kind of wish we could. I understand why we can't, but I kind of wish that we could, because like, a player like Derrick Henry, whose contract voids after this season, a guy like AJ Dillon that hits the market soon if he has a big year in Green Bay, or I'm just thinking about some of these guys that are becoming, guys like Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, who could potentially be franchise tagged the second time next season. They'd lose their minds, but could it happen? Sure. As these running backs or Jonathan Taylor, right? He's an undrafted.
That's a really interesting
free agent. Like, do you just do the same thing with him again? Like next year, if you're the Colts, you just franchise tag him, and then you say, okay, $10 million, $11 million, we're Gucci, we're moving on here, and then
that number's going to keep going down, by the way, because the franchise tag.
Yeah, that's right.
Is built on the average of what is it, top 10 or top 5 salaries?
It's top 5, yeah.
Or it's the top 5 salaries of running backs. Well, if you look, if the Saints cut Alvin Kamara next year, if you look at the amounts for 2024, Alvin Kamara is going to make 18.8, Aaron Jones 17.1, Nick Chubb 16.2. If any of those contracts are restructured or any pay cuts happen or anything like that, like that number could go down. And now suddenly the franchise, Jonathan Taylor's going to be making like $8 million. I mean, this is getting closer and closer to punter money.
Yes. Yeah. Uncomfortably close. The highest paid punter for the 2023 season right now, I think, is at like $4 million. $3.5.
Jack Fox for the Lions.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Roar. There you go. 100%. There you go. Way to go, Lions. And so I think that that's making the running backs look bad with the punter money. And then kickers are up there Lions, too. You know what I mean?
Positional value gods.
Hey, Jahmyr Gibbs is just as much a wide receiver as he is a running back. I've been told.
True. Can't wait to see him run out and ups against press corners.
Right. So I don't know, man. I just say it's such an interesting thing to figure. Like, okay, our team's going to be more likely to use the franchise tag. I mean, Matt Miller with his tweet, right? Who was like, draft a running back, start that running back. If the running back is good, franchise tag that running back after the rookie contract's done, then draft a running back and do it all over again. And one of two things is going to happen is that franchise tag is going to become the lesser option compared to the contract, and therefore the contracts start to happen again. Or you can't draft running backs as readily as you can draft running backs right now. And one of those two things I think is going to break. I've seen some folks that have suggested things like, well, the NFLPA needs to get involved and maybe they do something.
Yeah,
there's not really a way to do that. And the NFLPA is weak anyway. Like we've seen this over and over again. And so
we can't even get health insurance for veterans. Like,
yeah,
got bigger problems.
They got. I can promise you. Yeah, I can promise you right now that the players are not looking at the Players Association going, "Help us." Like that's the last place of their thing.
Yeah, and it would be such a weird precedent to do like something position specific, because
for
then
one
you would
position,
get somebody like would Taysom Hill start wanting to be called a running back because there's some extra benefit? Like, how do you deal with players like Deebo Samuel and stuff like?
Right.
That is such a weird territory to get into. Ultimately, I think this just is going to have to play out naturally, which is, a whole bunch of running backs are going to get paid way less than they're worth for a little while until things rubber band back, and either by a scarcity sort of reintroducing itself to the market because no kids want to play running back. So then suddenly there isn't this huge abundance, and then things will kind of adjust back that way, or in a schematic way where a team will figure out a way. I mean, like Kyle Shanahan will figure out a way to get, 2,000 yards with Christian McCaffrey. And then suddenly you realize, wait, if you have a guy like that, you can do that. And all, like that could be the way that this goes down. But either way, I think there is nothing active that like a governing body can do here that makes sense.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I look at, and before we get to Yike and here, is defenses keep getting lighter, and then the running back position gets effective at that level, like at a certain level again, that makes you look
And
at the
we've
position
seen
and go, okay.
Teams trying to do that right now.
Yep.
Like Vikings and Packers right now are sort of in lockstep doing that. The Packers draft 2 tight ends, and the Vikings going in for the like premier blocking tight end of free agency and trying to get a little bigger, extend their fullback. You know, I think the fullback is making a bit of a comeback.
Yep.
And that also is just kind of the ebb and flow of the league. Things get faster, and that means guys get smaller. So I get bigger. Then you got to get bigger, which means you get slower. So I get faster. And it's
the ongoing chess match of checkers. Let's call it what it is. That one's a checkers match. You get small.
That has been big. I mean, that's been the tale of football since the Spanish-American War.
I thought maybe we were going to the Australian Emu War, maybe, or something like that, but it's all good. All right, coming up next, speaking of wars, one of them is finally over. It's finally over. It's finally happening, it looks like, and we're so excited about it. We'll tell you what it is as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked on NFL. All right, everybody, continuing on and wrapping up today's episode of Locked on NFL. It's Tuesday. It's Luke. It's Ross, which means you get Yike and you get Like. And that's not our nicknames, by the way. One of us is not Yike and the other is not Like, although that could be fun. I think
Halloween costume.
Yeah, I'm probably Yike, if we're being honest. That's what we should do. For the Halloween episode, let's find Yike costumes and do that. But anyway, before that gets, it's that's what I mean. Literally, Yike the word, not a costume that makes people go
say like,
Yike. Yeah. We don't want that. We're out of that. So here's I'm just gonna get to it in terms of my like of the week. News breaking that the NFL has finally cleared the path for the sale of the Washington Commanders. Dan Snyder will officially be out of the league after the owners vote on the over $6 billion sale that will take place, that will sell the Washington Commanders to a purchasing group that includes guys like Magic Johnson and all this other stuff. But Dan Snyder will officially no longer be an owner in the NFL, and that is just fantastic. I think I'm the second happiest person around this. The first happiest person is Jim Irsay. No doubt about it. 100%. That dude has been...
He's been out of the news for months.
Man, like it's wild that like Jim Irsay is like the guy that's on the forefront of like, get Dan Snyder out of here.
Right. Hey, I'm not going to say what I was going to say.
Don't do that. So I'm just really, really excited for the Washington Commanders. I'm so excited for Washington Commanders fans, Washington Commanders players, Washington Commanders dance team members. I'm just so happy for everybody involved in this that Dan Snyder's finally going to be gone. And I can't wait to celebrate this all over again once the sale actually becomes official, but the NFL paving the way for it to happen.
We are getting to a point where the 32nd franchise in the NFL can actually become a respectable business again in the eyes of the U.S. government, which it currently is not. My like is going to go to Justin Jefferson. In particular, so the Madden ratings just came out. Justin Jefferson's a 99.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And he was so excited about this. Look, Justin Jefferson has been working very closely with Madden for years. He's been in their ads and stuff. He was almost on their cover. But he was so stoked about this. He says since he was 7 years old, he's been creating his own player in Madden and making him a 99, and now he doesn't have to. And he's just like jazzed about that. Like while everybody is having this crazy discussion about like if players should be allowed to vote, Justin Jefferson is just like, I got my score in the video game. Like he's just vibing.
That's so dope. So I love that. That's awesome. And obviously, former LSU Tiger, I love that as well. But even if he wasn't, like, he's just like, last week, David Harrison and I did this show and we talked about the most unguardable wide receivers in the NFL. And the two that we said were the most unguardable wide receivers in the NFL were Justin Jefferson and AJ Brown. And it's perhaps even more impressive when it's Justin Jefferson, because Justin Jefferson is the focal point of the offense now. He does it when there's no one else that can do it, whereas AJ Brown has a lot of ways the ball can move around in that Philadelphia Eagles offense. And so I love it for Justin Jefferson. Super hyped for him. All right, let's get to Yike. I'll go with the Yike because it follows the wide receiver trajectory. DeAndre Hopkins could have chosen any of the letters in the alphabet and he chose L. and he chose to sign with the Tennessee Titans. And listen, I said this.
Oh man,
I said this weeks ago that DeAndre Hopkins needed to go to a place where he was the difference. And I thought the Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo Bills, those are spaces where he could jump in, he could join that team, and all of a sudden he was the difference, and that team was a Super Bowl winner. If DeAndre Hopkins is ring chasing and he made the decision to go to the Tennessee Titans, I hope he enjoys his ring pop, because that's the most that he's going to get there. It is not a good choice. It's not good.
My God.
It's not a good choice.
The AFC South's not a winnable division. All those young quarterbacks.
You can win the division there all you want in the AFC South, but you don't have an offensive line or a quarterback or anything. You got 3 quarterbacks, which means you have no quarterback. You don't have a defense that's good enough to win you an NFL a Super Bowl. Like, it just doesn't make sense. He's not the difference there. Unless he's going to do all the other things too. If he's going to throw himself the ball and block for himself before he throws himself the ball, and he plays defense and gets the ball back to himself on offense, he's just not the difference maker that is the difference. He is a difference maker for that team. 100% undoubtedly, they will be respectable on offense, and that's cool. But if he wanted a ring, he should have gone to a spot where he could have gotten a ring. And this reminds me of Gerald McCoy when he spent months saying, I'm going to a place that can win me a Super Bowl championship. And then he signed with the Carolina Panthers and no one understood why. Like,
yeah, well, that was the high. He took the money. If I remember the rap sheet reporting right, DeAndre Hopkins took the money, which it's like, all right, well, I guess whatever then.
Yeah. So much for all the setup. I want to go to a place that can win me a ring, and that's got a stable organization and a quarterback.
Suddenly an extra $1.5 million, and you're going, that is $1.5 million. So
the only ring he's getting is the next one that he'll buy himself. Like, that's
right. He can afford all the rings he wants.
Yeah.
My yike is going to go to these gosh darn immaculate grid games. They are, let me tell you, these things they have me in hell. They have me absolutely.
If you're an NFL fan, these are a must. These are,
I swear to, like, you seriously expect me to recite 3 whole Houston Texans in the span of a day and know where else they played? I'm sorry, but like, I can't name Ravens. Get out of here. I don't know who went to Penn State and also played for the Ravens. Like, I cannot know this. These games,
I wish I would have been able to think of somebody.
But they have me in an absolute deadlock, which, I mean, it is just, I am in a fight for my life here.
Is that where Adafe Owe went to?
God.
Went to? Yes. Is that where he went? Yes, I got one. All right. Well, while Luke is struggling at Immaculate Grid, apparently I'm immaculate at it. So apparently I'm incredible at it. So that's great. These have kicked my butt on quite the occasion. If you haven't checked these out as an NFL fan, it's a super fun trivia game.
It's so fun.
It's just like a grid.
I'm so bad at them.
Yeah, and it'll set up like rows with a team, and then columns with a team up at the top, and then as well as other things. But that's like the basics. And so you try to name somebody that intersects both of those things, and so it's super fun. But I'm sorry you're having a tough time with it. But hey, Adafe Owe, there you go, gotcha. All right, y'all. We appreciate you very much as Luke pulls his hair out for joining us for another episode of Locked On NFL here as a part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, Tony and James answering the biggest questions and discussing some of the biggest questions around the NFL. We are almost at training camp, so we're going to be getting you ready here. And Luke and I will be back with you on Tuesday. But don't forget the podcast here with you every single Monday through Friday as a part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.